The reason I reached out to you for this episode was because of you mentioned something at the very last, the last recording we did. I think you mentioned that you have taught on or do a course on or just, have a lot to say about the topic of helping women separate themselves from the patriarchal view, which values them based on their sex.
Right.
And that really piqued my interest. Something that I've made quite a few episodes about is my own healing through my own sexuality, through sex
Mhm.
addiction. And there's lots of layers to this that I really exploring, and the
Yeah.
cultural messaging about what people are valuable for, specifically women being valuable as sex objects,
Right.
is a really strong one. So
Mhm.
I wanted to invite you back so we could have a conversation about this topic, if you're cool with that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love this stuff because it's so, I think that we forget how integrated it is into the culture, and not even just in a religious setting, but just in settings all across the world, sort of the
Yeah.
hierarchical system. Um, and it's interesting because then you run up against, well, if it's all over the world, then there must be a truth to it, as opposed to if you look at the nature of sort of the intrinsic, what we perceive to be like man and women, or like predator and prey, and sort of the natural, when something feels weak, they tend to need to overcome the thing that is the threat to them. And then so there's this sort of natural progression that happens, and you end up at the space where the thing that is sacred is being told that is the thing that is like the least valuable, and the person saying that the loudest has the biggest platform. And so it's a very
Can you can
interesting
you
space.
can you talk about that a little bit more? It's hard for me to follow exactly what you're saying.
Okay. So, for example, if I can just put it into very simple, like patriarchal structure terms.
Yes, please.
Um,
Yes, please.
well, so here's the thing is that women are portals. Like, if there is any consciousness outside of here, and we all come from consciousness, and women's bodies and women are portals from consciousness through to this earth. There's
Mm,
no other way for consciousness to arrive in this earth
yeah.
rather than the portal of a woman's body.
Yeah.
And so the thing that we value so much is life, and is children, and is, the ability to create legacy. All of that requires a woman, requires a matriarch. And instead of having the matriarch and the woman as the in the seat of honor that she deserves, because she is the portal, she's the connection from the divine to the earth. In the patriarchal society, it's completely switched. It's like, how do women serve men? Uh, you know, how can a woman's life support a man's life? How can, and it's this total flip on its head. And then women have to compete for the men, and the men are the thing that are desirable. And then they make a very difficult society within which you can be a
Yeah.
sort of, as a woman, come to life in a very full expression of yourself. And there's a lot of society that actively fights the woman's discovery of herself.
What I just so I see if I'm tracking along with you. What I
Mm-hmm.
hear you saying is that women are the source of all life, and a absolutely miraculous beginning of all life is from a woman. And so you would naturally think we would live in this like
Yeah,
to the beauty of a woman.
right.
But maybe because of maybe a variety of different influences, maybe
Mm-hmm.
physical strength, aggression, violence being
Mm-hmm.
hierarchical structures for so long, but women have been reduced down to and something that a man can grab
Right.
to
Like an
own.
object.
Yeah, like he's like, oh, like I can make children. I just need a woman. So like, hit him in the club and drag you into the cave. And so that is women then are like valuing themselves based off of who's chosen by the man, and it's almost
Totally.
hard to separate themselves
It
from
is.
the patriarchal structure of like your value is not based on being chosen by the man as an object to continue his lineage.
Right.
Yeah, I'm tracking
And
with you.
also, yes. And also, even whether or not you decide to bear children, women as creatures in general, there's women's intuition. There's things that women can just tell. And I'm sure you have a partner, you've experienced this where you're just minding your business and they're like, what's wrong?
Hmm.
And you're like, what do you mean? And there's just this sort of sense of they can tell when something's up. You know, there's this sort of sixth sense and there's this connection to the divine that women tend to have a lot more than men. So it's just as creatures, we just exist like our cycles are usually when we're aligned, they tend to connect to the moon cycle, you know. Um, so there's a lot about women that exists completely different from men, and there's a little bit deeper of a connection from the women through to the divine or the other side of the veil.
Hmm.
um, and instead of that being celebrated and women being um, held or viewed as the divine beings that we are, now it's just like slam the door, burn the witches. Women are good for childbearing in order to create legacy for men. And so how can we keep and sort of oppress, and now women exist for men. And I think that you now see a lot of that in society where it's like, do men want you? If not, then you're totally useless. And if
Yeah.
men get together and decide that the thing that you've created is dumb, then the thing that you've created is dumb. And so everything that you are and everything that you create as a woman is only valued in relation to, do the men like it? And that is why, hence the patriarchal society, because everything that is done as a woman is viewed against, does the man value it? If not, it's not worth doing. As opposed to being able to simply, I'm inherently worthy because I exist. I have this sort of sixth sense and extra special connection to the divine because I am a woman and I can explore all these different cycles within myself, life cycles, growth cycles, moon cycles, whatever it is. And all of that, like, I deserve to be celebrated in that, um, simply because it is a unique set of circumstances of life that I get to live out because I happen to exist here as a woman.
There's a lot of things that come up as we talk about this
Mm,
for me.
okay.
How would you clearly define, just as like an operating definition, the message that women receive from society at large?
I think the message is that everything that you do and how you exist and as you are, a man has to approve it in order for it to be acceptable. So if I have an idea, like Hedy Lamarr, for example, she was an actress, very beautiful, like back in the 30s, I think, and she came up with Wi-Fi, and everyone told her she was an idiot. And she tried to patent it, and they refused her patent, and then the military took it. And
Hmm.
then when men started being like, oh, this is great, oh, this is useful to like communicate with submarines as sonar, now all the men celebrate it, the military celebrate it. And then when she's like dying, when she's, in her 80s or 90s, they're like, peace, thanks.
Yeah, they're like, oh, she did help a little bit.
Yeah. Humble.
Yeah.
But it's that thing where like she was totally correct, but she lives in a society that doesn't value, they don't take the work of women and think, wow, this is valuable, or like there's a good thought process here. There's sort of the
Yeah.
assumption that women's thoughts, women's emotions, women's views are just, they're totally useless. If
Yeah.
I come to you and if we have the same issue, if I say, well, Braxton hurt my feelings and I'm crying about it, and if you're crying and you say, Angel hurt my feelings and now I'm crying, the way society will respond to us is completely different.
What's the experience like as a woman growing up in that? And I mean, even if we can touch on your experience too in your early years, I'm a man. I don't know what it's like to grow up in that world. What's it like to grow up in a world that says your gender is not, or your sex rather, is not valuable as much as men are? Because I do agree with that. I do agree with that. I mean, like, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
What is it like as a woman to grow up like that?
I think it's just very crushing, and it also pits you against yourself. You learn to become one of the things that is suppressing you, because not only now is society suppressing you, but now you are also an active participant in the suppression of your own self, because it feels like anything that is unique about you as a woman or as an individual is not worth expressing, because there is so much backlash and there's so much dismissal of anything that you create. So you just naturally will then stop creating. And so I think um, there was a lot of discouragement for the expression of self, even more so as a woman, as opposed to there was a lot less suppression for men. Like men were allowed to be creative, like, and just in case anyone is just meeting me for the first time, grew up in a cult. Um, but the men were allowed to, you know, feel a little bit more of their emotions, or they would be like, oh, you're angry, go play sports. Don't skateboard though, because Satan skateboards.
Satan does
Or
skateboard.
and then with the men were allowed to, like, oh, be a musician, or like, oh, are you curious about something? Okay, maybe you can help out with like fundraising or be on the computer. And then
Yeah.
for me, it was like, learn to cook, learn to clean, and by the time you're 16, you're going to be having babies. And so my education was actually stopped around sixth grade, like right
Yeah.
around when I started menstruating, right around 12, because they were like, well, now you're in your baby making years, so you don't actually need any more education. And so they just stopped my education completely. And then my job was to cook and clean
Mm.
until I started creating children.
And
And
do you have any children?
I do not.
Okay. Even not in a cult that
Hmm.
is like living in the South. I'm from
Yeah,
Alabama, and I mean we're next door neighbors to Mississippi,
right.
and I mean it isn't a cult necessarily, but the and please, like, don't hate me if you listen to this and you you're a woman from Mississippi. Like, this is my opinion, but it's like people in the down south Bible Belt, the women are taught to be subservient to the men, and it's hard to recognize that. Like, my therapist brought it up at one point, just talking about how in a patriarchal society, women will feel the need to protect the men because
Hmm.
it's like they're weaker.
Yeah.
They're supposed to feel powerful. They're supposed to feel in charge. They're supposed to feel,
Mhm.
and so the women will play small to almost
Yeah.
make sure the man, we don't, dismantle
Yeah.
the man's feeling of power and stuff like that. And
Right.
I mean, it doesn't have to be in a cult. I mean,
Very
I
true.
definitely want to talk about that too, but like, it's just that I'm totally with you. It's like the messaging that women get,
Mhm.
especially from where I'm from too, is that you exist to support the man. You
Yes.
exist to be subservient to the man, and that's such a
Yeah.
weird thing. Like, I've been thinking about it recently. Do you know John Wineland? Oh, really? Okay. John Wineland is all about like masculine embodiment and talks about feminine and masculine sexual polarization, and just really, really interesting stuff. I've been reading his book From the Core, and
Okay.
it's just, there's so much conversation about women and
Hmm.
femininity
Hmm.
that is like, oh my god, like, look at like, there's so much to be said. Yeah, it just feels like, this is really vulnerable for me to say, but it feels really weird to say it, but like, you don't hear a lot of women positive messaging, like, so it's almost
Yeah.
weird to hear literature that's like, women are superheroes, like, women have, the feminine has beautiful superpowers that the masculine don't have.
Right.
And it's like, what? Like, what do you mean? I thought that women were like your sidekick, right? Like, they cook and you work, and then they,
Right.
take care of the kids so you can go out and put bacon on the table. But like, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, the how women are valuable in and of themselves, not as a partner to the man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, it's that thing where we exist in a different realm almost. So, like, we both exist here on Earth, but there's a part of me, and again, like as a woman who menstruates, the cycle is tied to the moon. And if you look at it, the moon has a 28-day cycle, the tides have a 20, or the tides go along with the moon. And then the inside of my body also can align to the moon. And if I get too stressed out, like, then stuff in my body stops working. So I think having that sort of mechanism within yourself just naturally makes you pay a little bit more attention to what's going on. Like, why am I tied to nature?
Hmm.
Which is not something that men necessarily have. I don't know if you've ever paused and thought about, like, is there anything with me in my cycles? Do I notice, like, do you tend to get angry on, the third Saturday of every month? Or, there's less attunement to
Nature.
emotion and nature. Um, and so there's less research about that. And I believe that men also have a mechanism that is very closely tied to whether it's earth or moon or sun or whatever it is, but no one looks at it because men don't like to view themselves. They like to view themselves as like this, every man is in charge of his whole world and he's the god of himself and blah blah blah. And I think with women, we sort of view it as we're a lot more connected to each other. We're a lot more open to co-working. We're a lot more open to um, team working and sort of the mycelial network of like each thing benefits from being attached to the other. And women are better generally at communication or intuition or sort of feeling out and being aware of other people in the room because we are not necessarily coming into the space trying to dominate the room, which men sometimes that's sort of the default that they tend to do.
Do you feel like, in your experience, men might be prompted to come into the room and dominate it because that's the core of what masculinity is? Or do you feel like that's because that's what the messaging of what it means to be a
I
man
think
is for
that's the
men?
messaging. And also, um, if you are a secure man, you won't come in and try and dominate the room. So I think that is the insecure, um, that's insecureness showing itself in
Yeah.
through the masculine lens.
One of the
Um,
one of the things that John Weiland said that I thought was really interesting is that he likens masculinity to consciousness,
mm,
and says that his whole spiel is that masculinity is consciousness of the moment happening, and femininity is the moment itself. And so there's this like interesting dance of sorts. But it was really interesting that he said that like the best one of the best analogies that he could give for very strong masculinity would be sensitivity,
yes.
like the sensitivity of a hunter who
Hmm.
sits in the woods quietly and has trained himself to be keenly aware of the moment and be able to guide and lead the flow of the moment in a way that would be the best.
Yeah.
And his whole thing is that masculinity is a consciousness and awareness. Femininity is love itself. And so the job of the masculine is to work to cultivate in an environment that the feminine or love itself can come through the most. And
Right.
femininity responds to the masculine by telling him where there's blockages in the environment that need to be removed, like that kind of thing. How does that stuff land for
Yeah.
you?
No, that feels very truthful. And it also, I think the masculine and the feminine are meant to work together in a very cohesive way. And I think the more masculine you are as a man, the more you understand and have developed your feminine traits. And I
Yeah.
think the more feminine you are as a woman, the deeper you understand your innate power and your placing in the world, which allows you both of those when you fully understand your power as a woman and your placing in the world, and when you fully understand your like power as a man, both of those roads lead to softness
Yeah.
and lead to like a very, like you said, like presence and awareness of the moment itself and the ability to navigate through softly, but from a very aware state,
Yeah.
not a reactive state, but a very intelligent and powerful state that takes all things into consideration. So the woman has the understanding to see sort of all sides of the situation, and then working with the masculine they can direct it into a more like powerful place or a more um more intelligently informed state, if you will.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, and again, I think when you are awakened feminine and awakened masculine, you're able to hold both polarities within yourself. I've done a lot of development of my masculine side to the point that I run my whole life. I can come in and dominate a room. I can do all those things. And I understand insecure masculine and insecure feminine. And now it's the understanding of secure feminine and secure masculine. And they look very, very different.
Okay, so I can understand masculinity being grounded, presence, consciousness, attunement, sensitivity to the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and someone trying to like present themselves as good old American masculine might just be and just be like as loud and as big and as, you know, as possible. So
Right.
we would say that's someone more so trying to be what they think a man should be instead of being
Exactly.
masculine. What would the feminine version of that? What is fake femininity or whatever you would call it?
I think fake femininity is weakness. I think it's the coquettishness. I think it's the girlishness. I think it's the people. Oh, I don't know anything. Like
Hey,
you
look,
tell me what
this
it
is,
is.
I wrote this, I drew a little mouse because something you mentioned in a video at one point was
Oh,
mousy, right?
yeah,
Like, yeah, that's
right.
great.
It's playing small. It's the I don't know. Please guide me. Because I think women have a very, very strong intuitive sense. They know exactly where to go. Um, and in order sometimes to be able to survive in a patriarchal world, they switch to sort of the doe-eyed, the victim. And I think that is the weak femininity of like,
Dude,
somebody rescue, you know?
that's wild, man. That's
And
so
then you see
wild.
those things play out and you see those people find each other. You see the person being like, oh, I don't know what to do. I'm just a woman. I'm going
And
to
you're like,
cook for you.
well, I'll come help you. I'll do.
And you see,
Yeah.
exactly, like, come feed me. Yeah.
And whoa, man. That, then
And those energies find each other.
there's such a like a quality of being unseen in that kind of life right there. Like, you're not, that's not who you are. It's who you were told to be. That's who
Exactly.
you really don't know everything, bro. And you really aren't clueless, girl. And, but
Yeah.
you guys are pretending to be because it's the only dance you know.
And that's the thing is we do the thing that we developed in order to survive the culture that we're in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I can always tell when I meet somebody, masculine or feminine, depending on the role that they're presenting, I'm like, oh, I know which sort of society, like what the society you grew up in, what it valued in order to churn out somebody like this.
It's so, I'm sorry, I'm so stuck on that. It's so much, it's like, it's like trying to tell a fish that there's a thing it's swimming in called water. You're like, what? You know, like, what are you
Yes,
talking about?
exactly
Like,
that. Exactly that.
are the way that women make themselves attractive in our society is by like, you know, like, I don't know, like, can you like help me? Like, and it's so,
Right.
that's so crazy. And it's like, it's true though. Like, the studies will show you that like the more successful a woman is, the less likely a guy is to date her. And it's like, what fucking
Absolutely.
pussies these guys are that
Right.
we can't, like, the idea of a woman who also is winning in the game of capitalism
Right.
isn't like, go you badass. Like, that's awesome.
Right.
You know, that's
Right.
crazy.
And it's really interesting because then usually the thing that they will attack then is like you're secretly unhappy, you secretly wanted children, you're secretly blah blah blah. And again, if as a woman you say no, I'm happy and I'm fulfilled, because what a woman says is so devalued, especially in this hyper masculine, insensitive, like not insensitive, in the insecure masculine, they never take what women say into consideration. It's the immediately like, you're lying, you're a bitter old hag. And it's,
Yeah.
if you look at, I love doing this. Sometimes I'll look at comments of, you have these women saying like, I follow a lot of very like successful women because I love successful people, but I know that successful women have sort of gone through the same ish journey that I've gone through. So I always admire and watch this stuff. And it's funny sometimes to look at the comments, and it's always the same energy in the
Mm.
comments. It's always the same lens. It's always looking through the like, you're secretly upset, you're secretly lying, and you're secretly going to blah, 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 because that is the patriarchal lie. And that is the thing that the woman unlocked in order to find the thing that she likes and loves, and live her own life without needing male approval. But the reason I think you see so many of those comments is because they're trying to remind you that, like, no, you're supposed to have
Get
male
back in
approval.
line.
Yeah, get back in line. And it's to get the masculine approval. And it's like, that's not masculine approval. Like, first of all, I don't need masculine approval. Secondly, masculine approval is not me like stepping back into this sort of insecure masculine view of me and being mousy again. But that for them would be sort of victory over the female, is if they feel less empowered. And if they step down from that place of power, then they feel like, okay, then the masculine is dominant again, as opposed to masculine. I think true masculinity is entering the room and making sure that everyone feels safe. Like, there's this one man that I really admire, and he does this very well. Is very, very large man, and he looks like the kind of man that would come with sort of the alpha bro personality, and the softest man you've ever met in your life. And he walks into a room and he'll make sure everyone feels comfortable. And if he sees somebody feeling sort of out of place or uncomfortable, he'll go up to them and introduce himself. And very, very nurturing. And I think that that is the masculine, is like, is everybody okay? Does everybody feel safe?
It's hard to imagine a world where that's not like ours.
Yeah, like it's very true.
I'm trying to think about, like, there's just so little information. There's so little literature. There's so little people talking about it, because that, like, it's so true. Like, women, to win the game that is mapped out in front of women, you become less. And it's like a weird race to the bottom, like less competence, less capability, and you're more desirable.
Right.
Okay, so this might be a good segue for sex stuff, because like, okay, so women it's not set up in our culture for women to be desirable based on their skill at business or their leadership, or, you know, even don't try to get too creative, honey, because like, you know, don't try to do something like express yourself. We're not here for that. We're here for the men. Primarily, we're here for sex.
Right.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
How, like, what's the messaging to women? Everything we've been talking about, but let's filter it to sex stuff.
Okay.
What, like, I don't know, what comes to mind for you in that department?
I think it's the same thing of, don't grow your sexual personality. Don't discover what you like, because your job in sex is to make the man feel like he's done a good job. So however you can do that. And so if you can fake the orgasm in 1 minute, or if you can say anything that he does is good, then they all start talking about you. Then they all find you valuable. Then they all want to have sex with you. Again, you're racing to the bottom of the barrel, and there's nothing for you. But that's sort of the messaging that the weakened masculine feels like they've won, you know, and they feel like, oh, I made this girl come in 1 minute, bro. And you're like, first of all, no,
you didn't.
no. And then you get the pushback of, yes, I did. Yes, you know, because and it's like, well, no, you've raised this woman in a patriarchal society where she already feels like her worth is, you know, tied to that. And then if you've also tied her sexuality to that, then she feels her role is as a sex object to make sure that you're having a good time.
Yeah, to make sure you're enjoying yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So the sex, again, in a patriarchal world is, did the man enjoy himself? And what did you do to help the man enjoy himself, as opposed to the sacred act of sexuality?
Which is interesting. I'm going back to John Wineland because it's most recent on my mind. Like, like his whole spiel is that there's giving and receiving. And so more so, I'm sorry, let me reframe that. More so creating the space and the container, and then the expression of love itself.
Right.
So setting up and experiencing, kind of like that. And
Yeah.
what I immediately kind of came up for me as I was listening through that book was like, oh man, like the masculine in his literature is the creating the space, creating the container, and the
Okay.
feminine is the expression or the experience of love
Right.
itself. And so
Right.
then it's like, dude, sex as a masculine person, my intention would be to create the space
Mm.
for my partner who, if she's holding the feminine, to experience the most love and depth and ecstasy in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that, like, based on that, and that resonates a lot with me, that seems like the truth of it would be your role as the masculine would be
Mm-hmm.
to create the space of which the feminine partner can experience the most love and the most
Right.
orgasm and the most bliss,
Right.
but we missed that altogether. Is we're
Completely.
just like, we're fucking women looking at it like a mirror, like, oh, I fucking look so good, don't I? Like, this is all ooh ah, you know?
Yeah. And so the whole act goes from being like the act of connection. And I think, like you said, if the man is able to create a container for curiosity and exploration, and the woman has been encouraged to explore herself and her feminine power and how she experiences sex, what does she like? What does she want to create? And you create a safe container for a woman to explore what she likes sexually and to sort of you get to explore each other and create something that is unique within like your connection sexually, as
Yeah,
opposed to like, well, I did it in a minute.
yeah.
And you're
Like
like,
it's a
okay,
game, like a gamified porno kind of thing.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
and then two, like, it's not like women feel. I'm speaking for women here, so shit, cut me off, I guess. But it's not not like women feel that their what they've been told their role is in sex is to
Right.
receive, but to
Right.
perform.
Exactly.
Right? It's like my
Exactly.
job's to perform. Because if it was to receive love and to
Hmm.
receive energy,
Right.
then that might be different already.
Hmm.
Because then it's
Right.
like, how am I receiving this? And then the second word that comes to mind is feedback. Like, how am I receiving that? This isn't quite right. I'm not sure about this. Hey, let's slow
Yeah.
this down. Hey, can we like, can you connect with me? Can you look at me? Can you change your
Right.
socks? Like this, you're not creating an environment that's conducive for me to sink into the depth of this moment, right?
Right.
That is like, as a man, as a masculine identifying person, that is what I want out of the sex. That's what I want out of the that relationship is I want feedback of how my
Right.
love is being transmitted to you. How am I creating the container? It
Right.
makes me go like, damn, dude, like you trained yourself based on your feedback. And if your feedback has been just like cheat coded to just make you
Right.
think you're winning the whole time, like
Yeah.
it makes me, and I feel like I can speak for the entire men in the world, it makes me go like, hey, we've been bamboozled, man. They didn't even like
Right.
it the whole time. It was a joke. It was just a big joke on us.
Right. And but what you just described is an intimate experience with your partner. And so
Mm.
because you are in the place that you are in, you are in a mental and emotional space where you desire healthy sexual connection, which is intimacy,
Yeah.
as opposed to, maybe a different version of yourself 12, 13, 14 years ago that you just wanted to like have sex with the sexy thing.
Mm.
And it's a completely one is self-gratifying and the other is the experience of wholeness with another person. And it's very different.
It is very different. I got to be honest, I'm working on that. That's something
Mm.
I'm working on. I'm coming out of a lot of sex addiction, porn addiction. Like, so the whole have sex with a sexy thing, that's not too, it ain't 10 years behind me.
Yeah.
it ain't 10 years behind me, but
But I think the thing that holds both men and women back, and I think women have the extra barrier of being told they're not sexual beings. You hear that all the time, like, well, men
yeah,
are visual sexually, women are not. And I'm like, who said that?
a
How are
guy.
women not how are they not visual when it comes to sex?
Yeah.
And like, well, did a man do this research? Um, but
Is there any
again, it's
data?
like,
Sorry to
what's that?
interrupt. Is there any data on that? Is there any Like, is there any data that says men sexually aroused with visual and women are more schematic?
There's articles. I think you'd be hard pressed for data, but you can find a lot of articles.
Gotcha.
So,
Roger that.
um, and then you also are finding articles now that like, we just found out that women like porn. And you're like, well, we've never thought this because women are not visual. And I'm like, again, who decided women are
Yeah.
not visual? You know, but I think that women have the extra barrier of being told that like you don't need to develop sexually because your job sexually is to gratify the men. I think men are maybe a little bit more encouraged for, what your sexual personality is. But I think both sexes suffer from lack of sexual education of yourself as a sexual being. Because like, who is Braxton as a sexual being? Like, are you developed as a sexual being? And then like, who am I as a sexual being? What do I like? How do I experience sensuality? Like, do you know those parts of yourself? And the thing is that sometimes we just don't get to know those parts of yourself because it's humbling to look at that whole aspect of yourself, which is a really intrinsic part of the human experience, and to realize, oh, I've never thought about this. I've never thought about like, how do I sensually come alive? How do I like to be touched? Can I acknowledge that myself and then express that to the person I'm with, which then starts to be like, well, I can if the person has created a safe container. And then all those things start to take care of themselves if you find that sensual or sexual part of yourself and bring it to life. And those are the things that we are discouraged from doing, male
Yes.
and female.
Yes, because in our brain, sex is
Mm-hmm.
bad, man.
Right.
Sex is like, like you're supposed to talk about sex like this. It's not supposed to be
Right.
something. It's not like
Right.
it's the thing that creates life itself and should be celebrated and like put on the
No.
wall as a mural. No,
Right.
it's like something you sneak on your iPod Touch in 8th grade in the middle of the night when no one's awake to watch,
Yeah. And
madthumbs.com.
religion has a very large part to do with that.
Like Puritan, like kind of roots
Hmm.
of our
Absolutely.
civilization. That okay.
And now we take a turn for the worse. Here's my premise is when you take something that naturally grows and you put an incredibly oppressive lid on it, it will still grow, but if you've mushed it into this little container, it has to pervert itself. It
Yeah.
has to start turning into something very insidious because you've created parameters and it's unnatural for this thing to contain itself within these parameters.
Yeah.
So what is natural would be like, oh, I'm starting to find out about myself sexually. Okay, well, let me touch myself, or let me look at certain images, or let me read these books that are exciting. And instead it's like, don't touch yourself because God's watching you and you're a sick sicko. And like, God's watching you masturbate. He's going to send you to hell.
God's like, yeah, do it.
First of all, like, why is God watching
Why
you?
is God watching me, man? God digs it. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And then if we're made in the image of God, we should be able to watch people do it too. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But there's sort of this lens that really starts to make you find this part of yourself disgusting. And if you
Yeah.
find sexuality disgusting, you'll start to do disgusting things with it. And that will become the norm. And I
What do you,
think that you see that most obviously in the Catholic Church. I think it's the
ah.
biggest example of how things become very perverse when you take a natural thing and you attempt to suppress it with religion.
Okay, do you think that when you suppress sex
Mm-hmm.
with like bad, don't look, don't touch, then do you think that like priests wanting to have sex with little boys is something they wouldn't have felt unless they like if they weren't part of the this really sexually repressive ideology, they would never have wanted to fuck an 8-year-old kid? Like, is that something that happens because the repression, or is like pedophilia something that's in the brain and they choose to be priests because it's a good job for someone, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, but I think this is very complex, and I'm just going to shoot from the hip here.
Yeah,
But
please do.
I don't think that you can say, if this, then not this. But I think what you can say is, this thing is so wholly oppressive. It's so completely oppressive to the point that it's sort of the perfect storm. And it's like, you having sex is disgusting. Your sexual organs are disgusting. You thinking any sexual thoughts is disgusting and perverse. And also, it's very difficult to suppress sexual urges for your entire life. And so the more you feel those urges, the more you try to protect yourself from them. So you end up joining the church. And then you also are like, well, forgiveness is a thing, and I'm doing so many good things for so many people. And then there's also that through line in the church of like, the more you do good for people, sort of the better you are. And you start to feel that self-righteousness. And then you start to think, okay, well, I've been suppressing myself for so long, but I'm such a good person. And then I still have these urges that I'm trying to suppress. And then if I do it with this like child, hopefully they won't say anything. And then I can also
Yeah.
teach them that
It's like, sorry.
I can teach them that this is a terrible thing, and they'll feel disgusting. But then I can also tell them that God is going to, they're going to be in trouble with God if they say anything, because now they feel gross, and hopefully God hates them as well. And also, just to wrap it all up,
Please
I
do.
can go ask for forgiveness, and it'll be cool.
I
And
mean,
so now you have this cycle that allows that. And then when you say something about it, or somebody above you finds out that you've done this thing, because you're tied to God, they want to keep God safe. So they're going to cover it up for you. And that's what you see. You see this perfect storm within the Catholic Church of this happening over and over again, ruining lives and really, causing, a lot of mental health crisis and suicide. And like literally people end up taking their own lives because of it. And it's all under this like perfect storm of the suppression of self and sex and religion. And so you're taking a thing that is sacred and holy, and you are perverting it so much to the extent that it becomes the worst thing that can happen to another human being.
That's a really interesting, like, it's a really interesting topic to talk about, the perversion of sexuality because of the container of shame.
Mm-hmm.
I know that in my own life, I have started to move a lot out of, like, one of the reasons I want to talk to you about this is because just for my own self-interest of learning more about how I can continue to heal by separating myself away from seeing women as sexual objects, that I can accumulate and put notches on my belt, and that's what makes me a man. And
Right.
it's really interesting. I've spent the last year or so every morning for an hour writing on my relationship to sex, and
Mm.
there's so much healing. And sometimes I get a glimpse of my behavior sexually, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? Like, how did I end up thinking that? How did sex become so inextricably linked to objectification?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want to shed some light on the alternative of what, once we can collectively, women and men, see the culture of the patriarchal culture, and more specifically the very normalized
Mm-hmm.
objectification of women. It's like
Right.
really, really fucking normal, that then we can move to another relationship to sex altogether. And in my mind, what comes up is like competition versus and to connection. And I feel like we're stuck here in the,
Yeah.
like, how many women can you fuck? How many partners can you have? And how awesome are you in bed,
Right.
even though she's faking it, right?
Yeah.
Into like the vulnerability that it takes to create a space that you can connect with someone, give love, receive feedback, shift, and that kind of thing. What's your experience been like from even the cult, if that's where it starts, to shifting in your own relationships to people sexually. How have you yourself moved out of that worldview of I'm valuable based on my sexuality for men, into like this moment of something to be shared, connected, co-created, and
Right.
experienced together? What's that been like
Yeah.
for you?
I think for me, it started early because I realized, and I have that I know the moment that it happened. And to premise, growing up in Japan, I was very unattractive, because the Japanese have a different standard of beauty, which I do not meet. And so
What
my
is it?
relation, oh, it's just like a very small face, a small body, and I had to shop in the pregnancy section when I was like 12 years old. So it wasn't me. Um, and I knew, like, being in the cult, like they would teach you, like, a woman's only value is like if whether or not a man finds her attractive and if she's willing to bear children. And so I had known that. I had known because I had been taught that my only value was sexual. And unfortunately for me, I was an ugly girl. And so I then decided to develop other attributes. So I became like funny, and I became friendly, and I became, I was like, how can I people please? But I ended up having a lot of really great relationships and friendships that were based off of what I had internally rather than how I looked externally.
Hmm.
And so when I came to the US, I didn't know, I was unaware that I was as attractive as I am. And people started treating me very differently. And the relationships that I started having, I would try and treat men as, friends, and it would become very insulting to me to then consistently realize that all of them only valued me, um, because they had this idea in their head that they would wear me down and I would have sex with them.
Hmm.
And I remember being at this event called Wordstock, which was a cult event, and it was a play on Woodstock. They had
Yeah.
Wordstock, Word of God.
Can we go to this? Can I buy tickets?
We can't go to it, girl. We can't. Um, and this was my first sort of big event in the US, in the cult, and people had been treating me as a sexual object. And so everyone was very desirous of me as the sexual object. And luckily for me, I had a boyfriend at the time. And so everyone kept on like grabbing me or pawing at me. And I would be like, no, I have a boyfriend. No, like I didn't ask his permission. So I can't like
Oh, because
have
they're
sex.
yeah. Oh, okay. Because it's open season for them in the cult, right?
It's season. Yeah. But I was like, my boyfriend's not here. So I can't ask him because otherwise I could pray with him about it. But he wasn't there, thankfully. And so we were supposed to have this big dance night. And so many people had come up to me being like, I can't wait to see what you're wearing, wear something slutty, blah, blah, blah.
The
And
men.
so all the men, yeah, 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 of all
So the
ages,
so the men are
like,
like, "Yo, wear something slutty," and like to the girls.
yeah. And so that had been happening all day. And I was wearing a tank top. And I remember this. And I was wearing a tank top and like jeans. It was like 2005. So they were low leg jeans.
Yeah.
Um, Change for the dance, and I thought, I'm so mad that everyone wants me to come as this like slutty sexy thing, and so I'm just going to wear like a long skirt. I'm not going to change my shirt, and that'll show them that I'm not this sexy thing. I'm not just here for like in hopes that somebody wants to have sex. Like, that feels gross to me. I feel like an object, and I hadn't felt that objectified and disgusting before. So I was like, as my safety mechanism, I'm just going to wear a long skirt. I'm going to keep this tank top on. We're going to call it a day. So that's how I went to the dance. And then people started pulling me aside and being like, oh, you think you're so hot, you can show up in wherever, whatever. Well, it's true. Like, I still want to fuck.
It's
And I
impossible to
remember,
get away from it.
yeah, and I remember I went into a corner and I just started crying because I had
Uh,
never felt so unsafe in my life. And I realized, wow, there's actually nothing I can do, um, because it's not me, it's the way I'm viewed. And I can't change that. And so I just like curled up in a ball, cried in a corner during this Christian dance. And then my boyfriend's brother found me and he was like, what are you doing? And I told him the situation. And he was like, all right, well, let me like walk you back to your room. And like, he was like, lock the door. And I was like, yeah. And so he walked me back to my room and I locked the door. And that was, And that was the moment where I realized like I wasn't going to get it. So I think for me, the rebelliousness against the idea that I was here to serve men started at that moment, because I'd never felt so unseen and worthless in my life, and sort of not knowing what to do and not knowing how to navigate the situation. And like, I'm 19 years old. I don't have that much experience in the world, but I just know that I'm unsafe. And so part of my reaction to that was becoming like a I was known as like the prude, and I was the one that like people would be like, "Oh, she's so boring. Like no one can get to her. She's like super prudish. She's super." And I was just like, I welcomed it. So navigating that was a very interesting thing. And so I think I knew very early on that I didn't want to be seen as this like hot girl.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter that I didn't want to be seen that way. That's how people saw me. But I had to learn how to navigate it like very early on, from, everyone from teenagers to like 60, 70-year-old men who all would view me with this like, oh, here's a sexy thing. Why doesn't she want to play along? Because then we'll give her the like the ticket of like, now you're highly favored. And for me, I was
Yeah.
like, what does that do for me?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything for me. It just puts me more in the line of being very unsafe around more men. So I think very early on, I realized that that was not the game that I wanted to play.
How has your, because you know how like you co-create the world you live in, like what game you want to play, you play that game, and so then you attract players of that, you attract players, right? You attract players of that game. I would imagine you've been able to cultivate a lifestyle that has a really good radar for how you're being seen, and that
Well,
you want to connect. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's less about how I want to be seen, because how I'm seen depends on what you see when you look at me. And
Yeah.
so I'm not in charge of what you see. But what I am very good about is, do I feel calm around you? Or
Yeah.
does this defensiveness, like, is this defensiveness called forth? And if
So
it's called forth, that's not how I want to exist. So I will not be around people who bring that side out of me.
yeah, that's more what I mean.
Yeah.
Like you can tell how people see you, and so then it's like, we're not gonna do that. You see me as a sex object, so we're not gonna. So
Right. We're
what?
not going to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not gonna do this, and you can sense that.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about the first few times you began to have relationship, whether it was romantic, sexual, or platonic, where you went like, this is interesting. Like I feel like I'm being seen for me.
Right.
I feel seen. I feel safe, and
Yeah.
kind of how's that? Can you compare and contrast those two worlds and inspire people to make the jump? You know?
Yeah. Well, I think, and I'm trying to do this in a way that doesn't expose characters in the life. Um,
Expose them.
use first and last names.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Leave the middle name out, so we're good.
right. For me, the realization of just a level of respect. And I remember going out for a date with this person who was, again, a very large human being, but so sensitive and attentive and just loving. And there was no expectation. And um, they were very generous and traditional, opened the door, paid for the meal, et cetera, et cetera. And with the intention simply to get to know what was underneath the casing. Because of course the encasing is fantastic. And that's sort of neither here nor there, but that's not the thing that is actually valuable. The thing that um, if you're near someone, like, yes, you're in the same physical space as them, and so your bodies are sharing the same sort of both the containers are there. But if you are connected to what's inside your container, you understand that the valuable thing is not the container itself. What's inside? And so I think it was the first time in a very long time that I saw that this person was actually interested in what was underneath. And then what it allowed me to do was just like completely soften and be like, oh, I
Mm.
don't need to watch for certain things. I don't need to make sure I'm always aware of where my drink is. I can really just start to unfold and meet a new part of myself and get to know myself as I exist alongside whatever is inside of this container. Like there's energies. And so I respond to the energy that you are providing and you respond to the energy that I provide. So do us being in contact with each other, do both our vibrations raise, and are we able to create something new together that is wonderful? And so that was sort of a very interesting realization for me of like it's more about energy creation.
Hmm. What when you say you begin to see yourself unfold more now that you feel you're in a safe environment?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've leveled up, right? Now you're interacting with people that aren't part of the cult, and even in normal American culture and in
Right,
global the world, someone that has doesn't see people valuable just based on the sexual availability or
right.
attractiveness of them. What
Yeah,
did you begin to discover about yourself, Angel, in that? Like now you're able to see more parts of yourself kind of rise to the surface. What you know what I'm saying
yeah,
when you say unfold? What'd you
yeah.
notice?
I think it was the noticing that there is so much more that was untapped because I was trying very hard to keep it safe.
Mm,
And there was so much energy going towards saving the inner being because I was the only person who was concerned about it. And so to have sort of a masculine presence
yeah,
also be concerned about the inner state and does the being on the inside feel good and how can we bring her to life, and then to sort of understand like, oh, that's actually partnership,
yeah,
is that there are two of us now in this relationship, both concerned with bringing me to life and also bringing him to life, or whoever it is that your partner is, like regardless of gender. If you're in a safe place and a safe relationship, there should be a part of you that feels like it can unlock and come to life a little bit more.
yeah. There was a question I was going to ask about that. Let me see if I can get it. No, I don't have it. I don't have it. But the next thing that comes to mind with what we're talking about is like, go with me on this. First, they only want you because they want to have sex with you. Then
Mm-hmm.
you go, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm holding the sex stuff back here, and you're not getting that. You're going to get me. And so I'm not doing the whole, like, I'm a sex object thing. I would imagine that, one of the really cool themes we talked about last time was like, don't stay there. You can't move on. Like, you always move on, always grow. And so that is where a lot of people get stuck. They go, men are fucking pigs. They only want to fuck. So don't let them have it. And
Right,
tell me about the time, how you then, if you have, and it's okay if
right,
not, but how you then get to the point to where you own your own sexuality and can
right.
then involve it in the moment as your own thing, not as something that you're finally giving up because he
Not as
wins
like
the
a
game.
sex weapon,
Huh?
not as a sex weapon.
Yeah, something like that.
Um, I think that it is the understanding of your personal power in all aspects. So I have a very powerful mind. I've cultivated it. I have a powerful body. I've trained it. I have a powerful sexual self because I've discovered it. And um, all of those things are here because I want them to be here, which means I had to give time and effort to bring those to life, which means that as a partner, I am very confident in my ability to be a very good partner. And so then it becomes, then you get to pick partners that you think are worthy. And it's the same thing with a conversation. I'll be with somebody and they'll be like, oh, I heard you talk really well about this. So let's discuss, and I can choose to either use all my brain power to go into that connection or just be like, look, not to be rude, but like, I know you're not, this is going to be a waste of breath. So I'm just not going to do this.
Mm.
Um, and it's the same thing emotionally. It's like if somebody feels like a person that doesn't know themselves, feels unsafe to unlock all of my parts and resources and everything to care for them. So I need to then hold that and give it to myself until I find somebody that it feels safe to give it to. And same thing sexually. It's like all of that can unfold if it meets its match. Like all of these things can be at max capacity, but I can also choose to unlock them at different points depending on the experience that I want to have. And I am in charge of the experience that I'm having.
Hmm. That's a beautiful thing, Angel. Yeah, it really, really is. There's levels to this shit, man, and you don't have all the keys, baby. Yeah, so
Also,
there's,
the understanding that, like, I hand you the keys.
yeah,
And so I am in
yeah,
charge of all aspects. All of this stuff exists. What do I want to play? What game do I want to play? How do I want to exist with this person? How much fun do I want to have? How much sex do I want to have? What sort of conversations? What sort of
yeah,
emotional connections? And
and
then, should I decide to do so, I will hand you the unlock, and then we'll play the game.
that's such a strong position to operate from too. Versus I'm valuable based on what doors of mine you want to open. You
Right.
know,
Exactly. Oh,
that's
totally.
yeah.
Yeah. But I think that regardless of gender, everyone should have this, should cultivate this feeling of self possession. Because if you don't own these parts of yourself, then who does? Who do they belong to? Who has
Hmm.
the key? Who have the key?
I know that I know that I feel that too in my heart. I feel
Mm.
I feel that I have depths of chambers
Yeah.
of safety cards. Like I need to have so many punches on your safety
Right.
card to let you that
Yeah.
deep. I had a conversation with someone the other day, and like they asked me about a topic that's really really close to my heart right now, and I said like, hey, I'm just gonna be honest with you because we haven't been like super close. We can't really talk about that right now. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's like you had to learn, I'm sure, how to do that. It,
Yeah.
I don't think that you were taught that, but now that you have this view of yourself as a autonomous person and you understand that you're in charge of the world, um, you know that that's an option. That if I say, Braxton, tell me about like the worst thing that's ever happened to you, you can be like, Angel, like I don't know you and I'm not comfortable and I'm not going to do
Yeah.
that.
It.
Also why, like, and I think I did this with you as well when we were going to interview, is like, ask me whatever you want, because if I don't want to answer you, I won't.
Yeah. That's just you're just jangling the keys, man. You're just like,
Yeah.
hey.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
100%. Yeah. I think at the core of this, the most beautiful part of this part of the conversation is separating your life from a need to be approved. Like
Hmm. Yeah.
I need to let you in that room of my heart or my sexuality or what to see if
Yeah.
it's good or see if I'm good or if it's right. Like, is it supposed to be like this? I don't know. Like, is this how I'm supposed to feel, or is this supposed to be how I categorize the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me, or
Right.
what? The
Yeah.
the it's a really beautiful art form of or art thing of here. Hold on, let me real quick press this button on this. I gotta reset this.
Do it.
That's the like really cool thing. It's like it's first you are just watching people as they try to open your doors and you just let them in. You're like,
Right.
well, okay, what'd you find in there? And
Right.
and
Right.
then you're like, fuck these people. I open my own doors, and then it becomes this really like well dialed in intimacy of sorts where you really do develop. I feel like that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. That like you shouldn't let people in your rooms. Period. It's your fault if you let them in the room, right? Like you shouldn't give people access to things,
Mm.
and it's on us if we want to experience intimacy and connection
Right.
to get better at how we evaluate people and hand out those keys
Right.
before we give them
But
up.
I think it's levels of development. So I think first, especially if you grow up in an abusive environment, you don't know the rooms exist. You don't know that they have doors. You don't know how to close
Hmm.
them. You don't know how to lock them. And then if you do lock them, you don't even know how to access them. So I think that, like you said, there are layers to this. So like first, start to discover all these different compartments within yourself. And then you have to learn how to keep them all safe. And then you learn how to close the door. And then you learn how to lock the door should you need to. And then you have the key. So now you can go and develop the room and then exit and sort of keep that part of yourself safe. And then at some point, you learn how to hand the keys out. And then at some point, you just don't even, you stop tracking who has the keys, where are they? It's just, I contain all of this. And when I'm with you,
I can
what
sense. I
gets,
know.
yeah,
Yeah. And it changes too. It's like you're not a key holder for life, baby. You know, like, hey, things change. You know what I'm saying? You may not have been a key holder last year, but not now, you weirdo. Like you have
yesterday's
shifted.
key is not today's key.
That's right. The locks changed, baby.
Yeah,
She changed the locks, man. Okay. Are you doing good on time?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does someone begin to move into the stage of development of artfully, like using access to yourself as intimacy, like allowing people in you, like once they start to realize that there's this tender part, like something that me and my partners have talked about over, not my partners plural, but throughout my partnerships, we've
Yeah.
talked, there's often I've heard the words like, I have this gooey ooey center inside, and
Yeah.
there's this relationship with self that I've seen in partners over the years where it's this learning how to let people in, how to filter people out, and there just seems to be this aspect of like mastery that we're talking about that's like, how do you help someone, Angel, who does say, oh yeah, at my center I have this gooey ooey soft
Right.
thing, how do I protect that
Right.
and know how to sense when somebody doesn't have the intention to protect it themselves, like to protect my gooey center. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. I
What kind of
think
like roadmap would you give them?
I think the roadmap is, how do you do these things before you can expect other people to do them? So if you don't know how to access that part of yourself and love it and not judge it or hate it or whatever it is, if you don't even know what's in there and how soft you really are and how much you can actually love, and you don't know how that works within you for you, I think it's very unfair to expect someone else to know how to do any of that, and also to know when they've overstepped boundaries, because if you don't know how you are and how you operate, you also won't know when someone is overstepping until they've really egregiously overstepped. And then you just have to lock everything up, and your only remedy then is to go numb. So
Yeah.
I think the how to is to begin to love yourself into existence. And what does that look like? Does it mean taking better care of who you share your heart with? Does it mean leaving a situation? Does it mean not believing the things that other people or your mind is telling you about yourself? Does it mean having the courage to say, no, I'm not actually going to answer that just
Mm,
because?
yeah.
What does it actually look like to keep all those parts of you safe and alive? Not safe and numb and tucked away, but safe and alive.
Yeah,
How
like
can you
cut off as a means of protecting. Like we're gonna cut off
absolutely?
all a connection with it.
And I think really the thing to do is probably cut off other people's access to it, and to learn how do you nurture yourself? What do you need?
Do you think
And
we? I'm
go
sorry. Go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
I forget.
Yeah. um, how like do you think we or do you think like we just don't want to fucking do the work? Like it just we want other people to tell us what we need? Do we not want to take ownership of, like you said, loving ourselves into existence? But I'm curious what that means. But
I think it's difficult because we're not taught it and we don't see it modeled. We don't see an example, so it feels very difficult. And I think that if you do see it modeled, it's a natural thing that you do. So you don't understand why people don't do it.
there are
But
people who have had that modeled from them
yeah,
for them for day one.
yeah.
Where? What course
I
are they selling?
relationships. I know. I remember the first time I saw a husband and wife sit down and have a conversation, and they talked for like 2 hours. And I remember going up to their child and being like, "What are your mom and dad doing?" And they were like, "They're talking." And I was like, "Yeah, but they're not talking about anything. They're just like saying stupid shit of
Mm,
like the dad saying what he had for lunch and the mom saying what she's going to cook for like dinner and what the neighbors are doing." And she was like, "Yeah, they're just talking." And I could not I had never seen a husband and wife enjoy each other's company, like ever. And so I was really confused, and I had to be like, what's happening here? Like, I
This,
don't understand this at all.
this
Because
might
the
be a.
longest, what's that?
You said the longest what?
Well, it was just the longest I'd ever seen a couple speak to each other that weren't arguing.
Yeah. I don't know if this is. I don't know if this is the a horrible example. It might be, but this is what, at least how I see it in my head, is like there's a by my business. There's a daycare facility for special needs adults and older children, and there's such a wonderful relationship that you see with the caretaker of a child with special needs. There's
Right.
like a what they like, what they don't, what's okay, what's not. It's like so much different than just when you have a, and I use giant air quotes, a normal kid that just wants to do what every other boy or girl wants to do. And it's just archetypal, right? Like, to use the word we talked about last time. You don't know them intricately, the nuances, their idiosyncrasies. So in my mind, like that, your core heart, your deepest self, you almost want to tend to it like you would. It's someone with unique needs. It's unique, and you really have a hard time going to anyone else for the how-to manual on this. So you have no choice but to sit through the cries and sit through the
Yeah.
pain and the plays, and to accept the reactions that it has to life. Like radically just make space for it. Tend to your innermost self. With its unique and maybe special needs. I don't know if that means that your inside self is. I'm not going to say the word,
Well,
but that's
I think the sentiment is correct in that we are all very unique, and we must be learned.
by ourselves first.
Yeah, you got to learn. You have to learn yourself, and then I think love is creating space to also learn the other person.
Like, we don't, most of the time, like, to sit here and say, Angel, what I feel when you say that, or what comes up in me, or what I sense when you say that. That is such a level of connection to yourself
Yeah.
that most people never cultivate. I'm at a stage in my life where I'm really starting to, like, no longer not identify with certain emotions and feelings, and so I'm starting to gather more information about my experience in life, and so I'm able to hold it as I'm talking to people and say, like, the way that feels when you say that, or what comes up in me, that is like
Mm.
something most people, that's like something that is so hard. I wish more people did that.
But we're not taught it. We're not modeled. We're taught times tables, even though we have
Ah,
calculators.
yeah, or how to spell, man, spell check or cursive.
But I think, so I work now with this company, and I'm trying to get them to take on this view. But it's so strange to me that we pretend that our heart and soul are not part of the component of what we are. So it's like, well, is Braxton wearing clothes, and did he eat? Okay, good. Then he's taken care of.
Mm,
It's like, well, that's not true. You also have a heart. You also have a soul. You also have a mind.
mm,
And so are those areas attended to as well? And if I'm a good partner, I'm not just going to be like, well, I cooked you dinner. So like, what are you complaining about? Like that makes me a very terrible partner. Um, and a good partner, like maybe I don't cook and clean, don't lift a fucking finger, but how is your mind? How is your heart? How is your soul? What do you need?
I'm like, you're like, I don't know, I'm really hungry right now. Can we go eat something first?
No. But that's the thing. It's like we're not taught to take those parts of ourselves into consideration, but those are the most important parts. So how can you start to navigate that and start to bring, like, what does it mean to bring your soul to life? What does it mean to listen to your heart? Like, a lot of times we've never done it, and so we're
Well,
just like, I don't know, do I just like be quiet? And a lot of times it's like, well, yeah.
yeah. What does it mean, to ask you that question directly? What does it mean to listen to your heart or bring your soul to life? What does that mean?
For me, it means to create a safe container within which my curiosity can come out to play. So, like, what's my heart's desire? It's like, what makes me happy? Is it, watching Pooh Bear and having an ice cream? Is it exercise? Is it, oracle cards? Is it whatever it is? why don't I feel like it's acceptable for me to be like, that's really what I want to do, so I'm going to do it? I have to be like, no, I should go climb this hill. I need to go run an Ironman or I'm a failure. It's like, no, why can't that be equal to, I also just need a nap. I need to get under my weighted blanket. I need everyone to be quiet and I need a nap for 20 minutes. And that somehow is looked at as like, that's a useless thing to do, you useless human being. But if I'm like, I'm going to strap 30 pounds onto my chest, I'm going to run through fire, people are like, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and if it's bringing parts of my soul to life, great. But there's this lack of giving credence to whatever it is that you desire to do. It's very much quantified of like, this is the correct thing to do, this is the incorrect thing to do, as opposed to whatever you want. What do you need? Does it bring you to life a little bit more? Then do it. Does it help you love a little bit more or understand people a little bit more? Like if you watch a movie, if you watch Moonlight or if you watch stories from people in another culture or across the world, that'll help you sort of create this texture and diversify how you view humanity in your brain. Then sit there, watch the movie. You know,
Yeah.
that's enough. Why do you need to do anything more than that? How can you start to create more connection within yourself that you're able to eventually take outside of yourself? All of that, I think, is so useful. And
There's
all of that is bringing yourself to life.
there are a few things that feel better, Angel, than the feeling my heart gets when I really soften enough to let myself be here and to
Yeah.
and listen. I just tune into Brax and I go like, "Hey man, like what's up, dude? Like what do you need? What do you feel?"
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I feel like for the longest time I already had rules and still do already have rules for what I'm allowed to feel versus not. And so instead of feeling that feeling, I feel shame. I feel angst, and it's just because on a deeper level, there's this feeling coming up that a long time ago I made the agreement with myself I'm not supposed to feel that. And so
Yeah.
one thing that I think is really interesting, Heidi Priebe talks a lot about this topic on her YouTube channel, really, really great, about like being willing to sit long enough to feel the shame and to unlabel it as shame. Because you like when you like Angel, when someone says like, oh, like Angel wants me to tune into how I feel, Brax says I should listen to how I feel, like I feel like shit. I feel shame, I feel disgusting, I feel
Right.
horrible. And there's like, I really want to be clear with saying this, there's a chance that what you feel when you get quiet are all these mislabeled emotions. Like I mislabel sexual feelings in my body as shameful. I mislabel anger as being like, that's one specific. I've mislabeled
Yeah.
anger as being petty and a weak baby
Right.
bitch. And when I
Right.
feel like a weak baby petty bitch, I feel horrible. But if I'm
Mm.
willing to sit and question that label I stuck on there a long time ago, I'll find out that I'm just feeling this self-protective feeling of anger.
Right.
And that like the release, there's this like break of sorts in my heart as I'm starting to touch into these long like forgotten emotions that have been kept so far away because I mislabeled them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like just for whoever's listening, like it's so dope, man. When you do that shit, like you start to feel it and you start to like,
Yeah.
you love whenever you meet Angel, you connect, you hang out, and then you start to really see yourself come out. And I'm like, oh, dope, that's cool. Like that's Angel. I'm starting to really see her. Like that feels good. But when you
Mm.
feel it from yourself, it's like orgasmic. It's like, oh my
Yeah.
god, it's like heart melting.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think that not needing to do anything with the emotion, like you don't need to label it, you don't need to act on it. If you're feeling jealous, great, feel jealous, and then have a coffee, and then go do something else. Like all these things are waves, and it's like how amazing is it that your body and your mind are so sensory perceptive that they're able to feel each wave move through your body. Like what a wonderful thing it is to be in this container that is your body.
Do
Like that's actually a great thing. So you don't need to be like, oh, I feel guilty, I feel shame, I'm a piece of shit, and you start sort of this spiral. It's like, oh, I feel guilty, oh, that's weird, how can I like be with it or move past it, or what do I need to avoid next time so I don't feel guilty? That okay, cool. And then
you
you've learned a thing, you've sensed a thing, you're now more intelligent than you were if you were not able to feel the thing beforehand.
you know how like a lot of in the spiritual community, it's like, you're not your emotions, you're not your feelings, like detach and see them like a cloud passing by. And like, that's
Yeah.
cool and all. But like, I've started to find a really beautiful element to like valuing my feelings, like, and saying like, no, your emotions are information. Like, what's coming in, you may have mislabeled it a long time ago, and so you're feeling shame when you should be feeling arousal, or you're feeling petty when you should feeling protective.
Yeah.
But like, like I feel like people should make that journey inwards to be willing, like, to feel what they're feeling and not try to just let it go. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And how can you begin to like open a dialogue with
Mm.
the things that you're feeling, as opposed to, and the dialogue being between your heart or soul and the feeling, not your thoughts and the
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
Because a
And
lot of,
yeah, to take in consideration, say like, hey, okay, like I'm sitting down to this little powwow. I got my heart, I got my brain, what my brain saying. I know you have a lot to say about what the heart is feeling, so I'm going to hear you out on that, I promise. But I am here to dissolve all of this and really get down to the core of it, to the real matter. Yeah, some cool shit, man.
it is. And it's such an interesting journey. It's never ending, and it's fascinating. And as soon as you learn one thing, then maybe you have an interaction, and then you got to unlearn the thing. And how wonderful is it to learn that you are ever expansive and can contain all of these relationships and feelings and
Yeah,
just continue to unfold.
I want to tie it in to as we close this conversation down. Thank you so much, wonderful people, for listening for an hour and a half to me and Angel discuss sex and connection and life. I think that, like, if you're willing to get to know yourself, if you're willing to sit, to open up that dialogue with your heart, with your mind, you'll be able to begin to learn about yourself, right? You'll be able to learn about yourself emotionally, sexually, spiritually. You're learning those unique needs. And then if we shift from sex being about objectification and competition to sex being about connection, if you're doing the inner work we're talking about, you're already beginning to migrate yourself towards a different lens of seeing sex, because then sex is this container to show up with all of this data on how you feel, how you operate. And so then, like, you know how like you can't connect with somebody if they're representing a false self. Like when you're
Yeah,
really embodied as an authentic being and someone else is, then you have real connection, and that is probably like coming times 1,000.
fair.
I would say so, maybe.
Well, I mean, find out.
Yeah, find out. We encourage you to find out what that's like, and please get back to us. Let us know what it's like to genuinely connect with another person and see what it feels like.
Yeah, and explore that within yourself, and then you'll naturally begin to explore in other people too.
Yeah. Angel DeSantis, thank you so much.
Thank you.